Crossfire. On the left, Tom Braden. On the right, Robert Novak. In the Crossfire, Washington Times columnist John Lofton and rock musician Frank Zappa.
Good evening. Welcome to Crossfire. What you've got here is suggestive, and I don't find it objectionable. But when you actually listen to the words of the songs, you get a shock. Personally, I find some of them in such bad taste as to make me physically ill, and some of them I wouldn't have in the house. Now, on the other hand, do we want the government to ban the sale of records with lyrics the government doesn't like? Do we want the government to say this is okay, but this one will have to go? And who should be the government censor? Whose job should it be to listen all day to dirty records and decide whether you can? Do you want censorship of records as is now being proposed in Maryland and in congressional hearings, or do you want to make the decision on your own? Take it or leave it, all by yourself. Bob?
Mr. Zappa, let me see if I can get your position straight. Are you saying that there is no filth, no pornography, no obscenity that should not be permitted to be sold and distributed freely in this country in the form of music videos and rock music?
I don't think that music qualifies as pornography. And especially since this whole business started with words. We're talking about words here.
All right.
All of the complaints were about words.
All right, take the pornography out there. Is there no filth, no obscenity that you think would qualify to be suppressed?
We're talking about words, and I don't believe that there is any word that needs to be suppressed. There's no scientific or realistic reason why you should keep people from hearing certain words.
Yeah, but
they
Mr.
should
Zappa,
even, just a minute, let me just follow that up.
There are certain words you use that are to describe an act of fornication which are brutal.
So?
Well,
how about putting that on the radio? That's not put on the. That's not permitted to be put on the radio. Do you think it should be?
Yes.
You think it should be on the radio?
Absolutely.
And on television?
Absolutely.
And
in politics.
I don't really understand
because
that.
it's already in politics. I think that if you use the so-called strong words, you get your point across faster, and you can save a lot of beating around the bush.
Well,
why are people afraid of words?
Well, look, Mr. Zappa, we're not talking about just words. When we talk about rock videos, we're
not talking about rock videos.
I beg your pardon, but
the whole thing is words.
I beg your pardon, but what they're trying to
they're selling it with rock videos.
What they're trying to restrict in Maryland is also obscene rock videos.
No, they are not.
They are. They're trying to apply the obscenity language to videos and to records. But why do you underestimate the power of words? Words have consequences. They have impact on people. Now, I agree with you that the first line of responsibility is the family to stop the kind of garbage that we're talking about here today. But good grief, can't we call on our government to help us in this fight, Frank? I mean, you have kids. Are you an anarchist? Is it the government's role to do nothing about this?
No, I'm a conservative, and you may not like that, but I am. And the fact of the matter is, this bill that they're talking about in Maryland is stupid.
How so? What is the function of government, Frank, the civil government? Isn't it to, in part, promote the general welfare and to help protect families?
Do you think that you're protecting somebody by taking away 7 words?
It's not just words.
It is words. It's about words.
Words also connote ideas, Mr. Zappa. Are you for songs that portray incest as just another kind of sex and perhaps even preferable sex? Are you for that?
Would you ban the mention of any incestual activities? Would you?
Well, why don't we make a pact?
Then why don't you better take a look at the Bible and see what's in there, what happens after Sodom and Gomorrah.
The Bible does not advocate incest.
But it
condemns it, Frank. Wake up. Well, we're talking about advocacy, Mr. Zappa.
No, we're not. We're talking about words.
No, we're not talking about just
content of the words.
Oh, you don't think words connote ideas, huh?
Yes, they can be assembled into sentences that get ideas
Well, how about
across.
answering my question about incest? Do you support records that promote incest as just another kind of sex, or in some instances it might even be preferable? Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with it. I have no interest in incest, but I don't think that anybody in his right mind would desire to have the government step in to make sure that they install a censor board that keeps certain things from being said.
Let me ask you something, Mr. Zappa.
Because sometimes the dumbest thing that gets said makes the point for you. And if a person is doing a song about incest, it gives you a chance to say, maybe incest is really wrong. I didn't realize that incest was such a terrible problem in the United States that we suddenly needed government intervention to cure incest in America by keeping words off of records.
Well, of course, incest in America didn't used to be such a terrible problem, did it, Mr. Zappa? That's come about in the last 20 years. years
come
or
on,
so.
John, that's not so.
Oh, really?
We've
Mr.
had-
You don't think so?
I
Not as a problem. Not
I under-
advocated in
I
songs.
understand your
Sure.
position on government censorship, but just you're a musician, you're a producer, you're a big man in show business. Do you think it is a good idea? Let's not say that the government's going to get in this all. Just as a matter of taste, of artistic preference, do you think it's a good idea to write lyrics that says incest is good for you? Does that make any sense?
Well, it might make sense to Prince. That's his business, because that's mainly the song that they're talking about.
But don't you have an
okay?
opinion on it?
My opinion is he's got a right to sing it, he's got a right to say it, and I got a right to not
Where does
buy
that
it.
right
or...
come from, Mr.
What do you-
Zappa? Where does the right to advocate incest come from? Would
That
you tell
song
me?
does not advocate incest.
No, there are songs that advocate incest.
Tell me them. I haven't heard them.
It says incest
Yeah, well, you ought to
good
get
for you.
out more. And I don't think you're being candid with it. You know what those songs are. Now, you said there's a right to do this. Where
Yeah.
does the right come from? Your group was called the Mothers of the Invention.
Mothers of
Mothers of
Invention.
Invention.
You ought to
And
get out more.
Yeah, and you're a very inventive guy. You make up
You
a lot
bet.
of stuff, like what was in the mind of the founding fathers. Would you look in the camera and tell them?
Which camera?
Any camera. And
Right,
tell
you
them.
directing the show
yeah,
now?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you certainly need some direction, Mr. Zappa.
Want
Would
to
you-
spank
would-
me here? Come on, what are you trying
Oh,
to
you
do?
into that too, huh? No, I'm not into spanking.
I love it
Mr.
when you
Zappa.
froth like
I'm
that.
Sure. Now, would you tell our viewers that what the founding
I
fathers...
thought
really-
he was going to be the one frothing today. I'm glad that you're
Yeah,
doing
wrong
it.
again, Frank. Wrong again. Now,
I got a napkin
would,
for
would
you
you
when you
tell us?
drool.
Excellent. Thank you very
All
much.
right, him
Now,
too.
would you look in the
You
camera
too.
and tell them with a straight face that you
Yeah.
think the founding fathers had in mind the kind of garbage you sing and write when they drafted the First Amendment? Do you really believe that, Mr. Zappa?
I don't think it applies. The founding fathers, for one thing, kept slaves, and take a look at what Benjamin Franklin used to do over at the Hellfire Club.
But you have repeatedly...
Not exactly
you
a
have
bunch of swell guys. I think
agree
they had
with
some
you.
good
I
things
agree
in
with you.
mind. But we have a document, the letter of the law.
Yeah.
Let's use the letter of the law and interpret
Well,
it
but
based on the
wait a
20th
minute.
century,
It is
okay?
relevant because you have repeatedly, in opposing even ratings for rock music, you have repeatedly cited the Constitution and the First Amendment. Do you think the founding fathers really had the First Amendment, that they gave us the First Amendment to defend songs that glorify Satanism and incest and suicide? Do you really believe that?
Absolutely.
You really believe
Yeah,
that?
I believe it.
Well, you're an
Mr.
idiot then.
Yeah?
You're an idiot.
Well, I'll tell you what. Kiss my How do you
Well,
like
take
that,
your teeth
buddy?
out. Take your teeth out and we'll
All
talk
right,
business.
fellas,
Yeah.
let's cool it
Yeah.
off.
Come on, let's
Yeah,
get really
come
serious
on.
here. Come on, let's froth.
Yeah.
This is government.
Over to me, Mr.
Mr.
Zappa.
Zappa, one thing you did I didn't think you'd do is you
What?
ducked a question. I thought you'd
Which
ask
one?
I understand your position on the government. I understand you have an absolutist position on the First Amendment. A lot of people have an absolutist position. But I asked you a question and you ducked it. I want you to tell me if you think that the lyrics saying that incest is a good thing have any artistic value or are in good taste, or if you approve of them. You must have some standards of your own. I'm
I
not talking
told
about
you
the
that
government.
You asked me for my opinion. I don't enjoy that kind of material. I'm not here to sell records for Prince or anybody else.
Yeah, but you defend it being sold, don't you?
Yes, I do
Yeah, well,
defend
then you're
it
part
being
of the
sold.
problem.
Well, but
No, John,
don't you think it would be a good thing to say to some of these people to cool it?
No, it's not my job.
What is your job?
My job is to represent myself.
What is
as
your
an
job? You
individual.
once wrote a song called "We're Only in It for the Money."
It's not a song, it's the name of an album.
Is that
you
right?
ought to get out more.
Yeah, yeah. How much money you made peddling this stuff, Mr. Zappa?
Millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars, Mr. Lofton.
All right, look, it seems to me, Mr. Zappa, that you've got to ask these people, both of them are on you, what they would
He's
propose.
accusing me of doing something that is similar to what that is being argued about. My
What's that?
lyrics aren't in question here.
Well,
Really?
They're not.
what would you propose, Mr. Lofton, as the means of censorship?
Well, I said I agree with Mr. Zappa that the first line of defense and responsibility is the parents. But what I do not agree with is that the parents have to stand alone, and we are not entitled to call upon our government to help us in the fight
Well,
against
now,
this
wait a
kind
minute.
of filth.
What is?
I mean, I
what
asked you earlier,
government?
are you an
Wait a minute,
anarchist?
John.
Is
What
the
government
for any-
censor?
Yeah.
What government censor is going to decide for you?
It's not. Tom, I've heard you say repeatedly on this show that we are our government, that we're allowed to call on our government.
Well, you
to
have
do
to have a
things.
man who is the censor, or a
Well,
woman.
the way it would
They
work-
have to decide this
Tom.
Lofton can hear and this Lofton
right.
cannot hear.
Tom, it would work the way the implementation of any law works. You pass a law, it has words in it, and then the elected representatives of the people try their best to apply it. It's the way you do it with everything else. Will they apply it perfectly? No. But we're entitled to use the force of our civil government to help protect our families. How could you oppose that? Does the government have any purpose, Frank?
Yeah, it has a number of purposes.
What is it? Name
I'm not
one.
going to give you a civics lesson here, but I'll tell you one thing. We must not see eye to eye on the idea of a government that must forbid things in order to protect
Really? What is the
families.
government's role? You've told me several times what it shouldn't do.
How about national defense?
Yeah, I
and making
consider
sure
this
things-
national defense, pal. Our families are under attack from people like you with these lyrics.
John, you don't have to buy them.
Mr. Zappa,
Could I make a statement
Sure.
about national defense?
Yeah.
The biggest threat to America today is not communism. It's moving America toward a fascist theocracy. And everything that's happened during the Reagan administration is steering us right down that pipe.
oh, Mr. Zappa,
Yes, Mr. Zappa.
Do you really think? I mean,
I really think that.
All kidding aside, in this country, with the permissiveness that we are moving toward a fascist theocracy, anything
You bet
goes.
we are, buddy.
I mean, do you think things like this would have
Come on,
ever
give me
been
that famous
permitted?
smile again.
When we were 20, when we were kids, you're about my age, maybe
I'm
a little younger.
45.
Well, I'm 55. Do you think when I was a kid that they would permit songs like that to be sold? I mean, permissiveness is the game. I mean,
Well,
I mean,
exactly.
you're not really serious if you're saying we're going toward a fascist theocracy.
That's right, we are.
Wait a minute.
In what way? Give me
Bob,
one.
Bob,
Wait.
Well,
One example.
what-
One example of a fascist theocracy.
When you have a government that prefers a certain moral code derived from a certain religion, and that moral code turns into legislation to suit one certain religious
Zappa,
point of view,
Mr. Zappa.
and if that code
Right.
happens to be very, very right-wing, almost toward
then
Attila the Hun,
Well, then you are an anarchist. Every form of civil government is based on some kind of morality, Frank.
morality in terms of behavior, not
of
in
course.
terms of theology.
Well, of course. But look, I mean, I couldn't believe in your
John,
hearing.
John,
in your hearing.
Okay, wait a minute, gentlemen. We have to take a break now,
Okay, we're gonna come
and
back.
we'll be back with John Lofton and Frank Zappa talking about rock music, I think, after these messages.
Producer and a musician who has testified before Congress that he does not think that rock music, dirty lyrics and all, should be censored.
Or rated.
John
Or rated.
Lofton takes the other view. Mr. Lofton,
Yes.
you don't have to buy this, you know. You don't have to buy this music with dirty words.
Well, I guess my concern extends beyond my own family, beyond my own children. I'm concerned about the whole society, the whole country, other people's
can you-
children,
but-
other people's families.
but-
other-
Can you control what your children buy? Come
No,
on.
not completely, but I
No,
try.
you
I
can't.
agree, and I want to say for the third time, I agree with Frank that is the first line of
But
responsibility.
you can't even control what your children
No,
buy.
as they get older, it's very difficult.
No, but you can control what they listen to in the house, and the rock
How
music
can you
is
do
pretty
that?
loud.
Tell me how you can
They're
do
rarely
that.
in the house.
You hear it, so you
Oh,
just
yeah,
go up
they
and
shut
turn it off.
themselves up in the room, and you can't hear it.
I hear it, I turn it, I go up and I throw the
Oh, you
record
can't even
away.
hear half the things I tell you. You can't hear those things.
Look, all you're trying to get around is the fact that you have an individual responsibility, and I think Mr. Zappa is right. That's as far as it can go.
Well, but you know, one of the things that interests me is the seemingly totally different worlds that you and I live in, Mr. Zappa. For example, you told this hearing last September that in America, quote, there is a tendency to hide sex, unquote. That is the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard. Sex is everywhere in America. It's on TV, radio, videos, advertising. What do you mean we hide sex in America?
You do hide sex in America because given the choice between putting erotic sex into a television show or putting violence, usually it is the violence that is opted
How
for.
about both?
Putting both in?
Yeah.
Or you mean in combination?
Well, I mean both. I mean the television is full of sex right now.
It's not really sex. It's
What
just
is it?
it's full of titillation.
How about advertising? Is that full of sex?
It's titillation.
I see.
All right, Mr. Zappa, when somebody mentioned the videos, you said, "Hey, no, this is not it." Why don't you want to talk about the videos?
The reason I don't want to talk about the videos is the issue came up over the lyrics and what they've done in trying to promote the issue. If rock videos did not exist, they wouldn't have had those flashy little bumpers to put on before each of the local news shows when they would do a story on
Well,
this.
do you feel differently about rock videos then, that they should be censored?
No, I don't. I just think that you shouldn't even discuss them when the topic is words.
But I mean, we can discuss anything we want.
Oh,
I mean,
sure. But apropos of this
But you think
particular night.
anything goes on the rock videos, just like anything goes on the lyrics?
Sure.
I'm told that there is a rock video it's about to come out that has a school teacher undressing in front of a student.
It's out already. It's one of the ones they use for bumpers. They showed it at the Senate hearing. It's called Hot for Teacher, and the group is Van Halen.
What do you think of that?
I think it's amusing.
Amusing that
you think kids should see it?
That
Sure.
grades.
Why do you think the kids should
Because
see it?
Tell people what it's about a little bit. He thinks it's amusing that you might have a grade school class that is hot for teacher in a sexual way. Why is that amusing?
why shouldn't it be amusing?
Well, you're not smiling. You don't look too happy about the
Well,
video.
why should I smile
What's
when I'm
amusing
sitting here
about
with
it?
you?
What's, well, you could fake it, Frank.
Well,
Fake it.
I like
Fake
him
it.
better than you. Does
Well,
that
what
give
is
you a rough
amusing about
idea
it?
of what's going on
It
here?
sure does. But of course, I had that before I came here. What's amusing about it?
That is amusing to the people who like the concept of here comes the teacher, you expect the teacher to be sour, the music starts, the teacher takes off her clothes and she is wearing some kind of a bathing suit like in a beauty contest and does a dance on the desk and the kids look up and they are having a good time.
Well, that's a real laugh riot, Frank. Now look, one of the things I don't understand is someone who writes why you have repeatedly denigrated words and said, well, something's just words. You know, Adolf Hitler used words very effectively. It was called the Big Lie, and what it resulted in was 6 million Jews being put into ovens. Now, why do you say that words aren't important and don't have consequences?
I didn't say the words weren't important.
What do you mean when you say just words?
This argument basically is about the 7 dirty words that the FCC complains about. And that's what it is. And I don't see any reason to keep people from hearing those syllables put together. Those are not magic words. That's not abracadabra. You're going to turn into something
Do they have
when
an
you hear
impact,
it.
you think?
Certainly they do. And it depends on how they're used and in what context. In fact, the big one, the one that starts with the F, has maybe about 15 different ways in which it can be used in language.
Mr. Zappa, you were talking about the social background of the Founding Fathers, so you're a student of American sociology. But let me ask you this. Do you think that this country, you get around this country a lot, I'm sure, do you think that the lyrics of these songs reflect the real spirit of this country?
It reflects certain aspects of the spirit of this country.
You think it does?
Yeah, and see, if you don't like the spirit, then change the things that make the spirit happen. In other words, if you have kids that are rebellious, and you have kids who are hopeless, you have kids who go to drugs, then give them something to hope for.
Like what?
What
would you tell a kid he ought to hope for nowadays, Frank?
What I tell kids, and I've been telling kids for quite some time, is first, register to vote, and second, as soon as you're old enough, run for something.
And you really think that's going to give kids hope to tell them to go register for vote?
Mr. Zappa, when you
Well, I don't know whether it makes them commit suicide, but I think it gives them a little bit more hope.
Mr. Zappa, when you were testifying in Annapolis yesterday, I think, or this week at any rate, they had some kids from New York picketing outside who were from a school for the mentally disturbed, and they said that that rock music almost ruined their life. Rock music really disturbed them. Doesn't that give you some pause as to maybe you might be in error on this question?
Well, see, you're in error as to where those kids came from. It's not a school for the mentally disturbed. It is a place called Freedom Village run by a man named Pastor Fletcher A. Brothers, a Christian organization. He collects money for it. They have a farm in upstate New York. I've debated Pastor Brothers on the radio before. I've also seen his literature. Basically, what he has done is taken the children who have come to his place for rehabilitation. I don't know where he gets them, who sends them, but he carts them around the country in the Freedom Village bus and makes them go in and testify as to all the bad things that happened to them before they came to his place, and then he connects it to rock music.
You know,
wait a minute, but let me tell you some of the
we
things
got
that are
you.
included in this man's literature. He sends out this folder, it's about this thick, that has a list of different people in rock and roll, their names, their records, and their crime against humanity, so to speak. Some of the people who are included in this list are Stevie Wonder, and his crime is that he has an album that mentions astrology. In his folder, there are 2 or 3 mentions of astrology and maybe 3 or 4 mentions of Hinduism. He cites The Who because they had a Hindu prayer on one of their albums, and I questioned him on the air.
Let me ask you about something you said.
No,
yeah, I want to talk now. You've talked for a little while, okay? I think your answer about where hope is supposed to lie shows the bankruptcy of what once used to be the radical message. We have millions of kids in this country, Frank, who may be suicidal, who see no meaning in life, who see no hope in life, and you're going to tell them that the hope is in registering to vote, Frank? Are you serious?
Are you trying to dissuade them from registering to vote? Are you just trying to dissuade those kids from running for office? Is that what you're doing?
I mean, we're talking about kids that don't know the meaning of life, Frank, and you're telling them to vote?
We are out of
That's no
time.
answer.
We want to thank Mr. Zappa for being our guest on Crossfire, and John Lofton for being our guest on Crossfire. Bob and I will be back in just a minute. Bob, I take it you don't like the records any more than I do, but who's to be the censor? Should you be?
Well, I don't know about that either. I'm a First Amendment man, but I'll tell you what I do know, Tom, and I think you'll agree with me. The idea that parents are going to tell their kids what they can and what they can't hear in this day and age is ridiculous. I mean, they're no more able to censor their kids than the government is, than you want the government to censor everybody else.
No, some of them will get the records, but I just don't think it's possible to draw the line for somebody to sit and say, Stevie Wonder is all right and this guy's got to go.
I'll tell you where the censorship should come from. It should come from the industry, and they should have a little more self-policing and a little more self-control, in my opinion.
I think that's a good idea. From the left, I'm Tom Braden. Good night for Crossfire.
From the right, I'm Robert Novak. Join us again next time for another edition of Crossfire.
If you would like to comment on tonight's program, write to CNN Crossfire, 111 Massachusetts Avenue Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20001.